Have you ever stopped to think that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody sees? That quiet presence that goes unnoticed in hallways and meetings, wearing a simple uniform and hands used to hard work, might be hiding a brilliant mind and a power capable of changing the entire course of a company. That's right. We live in a world addicted to appearances, where badges speak louder than character, and where simplicity is often mistaken for lack of ability. And that's exactly where the mistake lies, and where the most surprising and educational stories begin. This story I'm about to tell you isn't just about a corporate turnaround. It's about silent justice, about a lesson delivered with the elegance of someone who doesn't need to raise their voice. Emily, the cleaning lady, the woman many didn't even look in the eye, was about to silence a room full of arrogant executives with a single sentence. And the most fascinating part, she never needed to shout or force respect, because when truth arrives, it doesn't make noise, it simply disarms. Emily worked at a prestigious law firm, the kind with large windows, impeccable decor, and sharply dressed professionals who rarely noticed anyone without a flashy badge or an expensive suit. Every day, she cleaned desks, emptied trash bins, and organized papers with impeccable discretion. To the suited-up professionals walking those halls, Emily was just background noise, an invisible presence nobody bothered to acknowledge. But behind the simple uniform and seemingly ordinary routine, there was something no one could have imagined. Emily wasn't just an exemplary cleaning staff member. Before accepting that humble job, she had graduated from one of the country's top universities, with a specialization in business management and a solid career abroad. A family crisis had brought her back to her home country and forced her to take on a job far beneath her level. But to Emily, there were no big or small jobs, only opportunities. And this would be the greatest opportunity of her life. 4 months, while quietly cleaning that environment filled with big decisions, Emily observed, analyzed, and clearly noticed the structural mistakes that the self-assured managers kept repeating: communication failures, unhappy employees, and strategic decisions that looked good on paper, but were pushing the company toward inevitable decline. Emily didn't need to speak to anyone to understand what was wrong. Her watchful eyes were enough to catch the most subtle and revealing details. Then came the day of a major meeting, a critical one, where the board would present ambitious plans to foreign investors. Emily, as always, was in the room minutes before it started, preparing everything. While cleaning, she clearly overheard the general director, confident and arrogant, mocking certain employees, especially those without a degree or an important title. As the meeting began, with investors paying close attention to the elegant presentation and flashy charts, Emily was suddenly called into the room. Assuming it was a minor issue, she entered quietly, as always. And there, in front of everyone, the general director gave a smug smile and said, "Maybe Emily, our cleaning lady, has something to add." Emily took a deep breath, looked each executive in the eye, smiled gently, and calmly replied, "I do, actually. After all, I've seen every decision being made here every day. And if you really want to save this company, the first step is learning to see the people who hold it up, including those without a suit or a badge. Because great companies are made by people, not by titles." A heavy silence fell over the room. There was no argument or marketing that could stand against such a simple, powerful truth. Emily hadn't just spoken a sentence, she had exposed the team's biggest flaw. Her observation, grounded in months of silent and meticulous analysis, instantly won over the investors, who immediately asked to hear more from this ordinary woman. The result? Within a week, Emily went from invisible cleaner to strategic consultant for the investors. And months later, she became the company's CEO, implementing radical changes based on everything she had learned while wiping desks and overhearing conversations no one thought were worth hiding. So if you still believe success has a face, a degree, or a title, maybe this is the story that will flip that switch inside you. Because while some collect diplomas, others collect truths. And when those truths come to light, there's no room left for arrogance. Buckle up, because this is one of those stories that completely changes how you see even the doorman of your building. Emily walked the hallways like someone who had learned to exist in silence, as present as the coffee in the break room, as ignored as the sound of the air conditioner. The lawyers, too busy with their pressed suits and inflated egos, never realized that the woman with sharp eyes and quiet steps was there every single day, punctual, steady, invisible. No one asked her name, no one saw value in her presence. She was just the cleaning lady, as if that defined who she was. But here's a lesson few dare to learn. The greatest stories don't always begin under the spotlight. Sometimes, they're hidden in the hands that hold the door open for you without a thank you. Emily saw everything. The lawyer yelling at the intern, the manager who only praised those with fancy last names, the partner who said, "There's no room for sentiment here." Every detail she stored, as if she weren't just cleaning the floor, but reading the room with surgical precision. And the most curious thing is, the world underestimates those who don't raise their voice. But have you ever thought about what someone might see when they're not being seen? Emily saw what no one else did, precisely because no one looked at her. And that's where our story begins to change, because while others chatted idly over coffee, she was connecting dots, mentally mapping every pattern, and preparing for something far greater. While others chased numbers, goals, and flattery, Emily focused on something far more valuable, the essence of people. Sitting quietly in the corner of the kitchen, or pretending to clean the glass wall of a meeting room, she listened to everything, not out of curiosity, but strategy. She was there under the request of international investors, who wanted to know whether that law firm deserved the biggest investment of the decade. And guess who was in charge of understanding what reports couldn't show? Hallway behavior says more than a 10-page resume. When a partner slams the door in an intern's face, that's a living report of toxic culture. When an employee cries in the bathroom and returns faking a smile, that's a data point the spreadsheets ignore. Emily knew that the real stories of a company live in small gestures, in whispered conversations, in the eyes that look away when someone feels inferior. And that awareness, the one most overlooked, is what true leadership is built on. How many times have you seen a boss praised in meetings and hated by the coffee machine? Exactly. Emily wrote it all down, connected everything, and made mental cross-references that even top auditors would miss. She knew that to transform a company, you had to first see where its soul was wounded, and that no one could see. But while she observed, something inside her was preparing for more than just reporting. It's funny how people judge intelligence by the clothes someone wears. Emily wore a simple uniform, but behind that apron was a mind trained in the world's best universities. An international MBA, crisis management specializations, fluent in 3 languages, and corporate experience that made many directors look like interns. But she didn't need to prove anything to anyone, because those who know their own worth understand the power of silence. Many are impressed by titles, but real power lies in the ability to see beyond the obvious. Emily had led restructurings in multinationals and saved companies on the verge of collapse. Now, there with a cloth in hand and eyes wide open, she was making the most accurate reading of the company's culture. She was like a human X-ray, unfooled by pretty speeches or impressive numbers. She knew companies don't fail for lack of profit, they fail for lack of soul. Do you know what's most powerful? Emily didn't use her past as a trophy, she used it as a compass. While some people kept repeating who they used to be, she used what she had lived through to understand what could be done. As the saying goes, while some show diplomas, others show results. And those with sharp vision don't need to shout to be heard, because sooner or later, reality itself will reveal who truly knows how to lead a story. The meeting room was packed. It was an ordinary morning, like so many others, where employees expected just another target, another demand, another soul-draining meeting. But something felt different in the air. The partners entered with tense expressions, whispers began to spread, and then came the announcement. The company would be under new leadership. A new CEO was about to be introduced. No one expected anything out of the script until Emily walked through the door. wearing a suit and an impeccable posture. The silence was deafening. The woman everyone had ignored for months, some didn't even know her name, was now being presented as the new company leader. The impact was immediate. Some stared at the floor, others pretended to be surprised, but everyone was forced to swallow their own judgment. Life has a way of teaching lessons that even time can't erase, and in that moment, a simple presence became an earthquake of awareness. Emily walked to the center of the room with the calm of someone who knew every step of the path. She smiled, adjusted the mic, and said the sentence that would change everything. "What you didn't see in me was exactly what brought me here." And that sentence, my friends, wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who has ever been overlooked. About all the stories never told, because someone thought they weren't worth hearing. But right there, everything began to change. If there was one sound that filled that auditorium, it was silence. But not just any silence, the kind that carries shame, regret, and the bitter taste of a misjudged soul. The fake smiles vanished. The whispers turned into muffled apologies. The gazes that once passed through Emily without notice now shifted away, ashamed. No one really knew how to react. After all, how do you face someone you treated as invisible, who now leads you? The impact was so intense that even the most arrogant seemed smaller. One lawyer, known for not greeting anyone below a manager's rank, widened his eyes as if he'd seen a ghost, and maybe he had the ghost of his own arrogance. Because when the mask of status falls, all that's left is character, and what the former bosses lacked in empathy was now overflowing in the living example of leadership standing before them. Emily didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to expose anyone. Her mere presence, dressed in authority and dignity, was enough to teach. And you know what's curious? Often, the best lessons don't come from the loudest voices, but from those who remain silent at the right time. And that day, silence said more than any speech. But while others drowned in embarrassment, Emily was already thinking ahead, because her focus was never revenge. It was always transformation. Emily knew that true power doesn't lie in commanding, but in transforming, and she started exactly where everyone else forgets, the foundation. Instead of promoting only those with elite resumes, she listened to the ones who had been invisible in the footnotes of the org chart. She restructured processes, trimmed the excess, and cut down on vanity. She replaced long meetings with focused conversations. She created listening spaces where before there had only been orders. Little by little, she rebuilt what manuals call organizational culture, but what she called respect. It wasn't about making everything look pretty on paper. It was about making the company function as a living organism. She included the cleaning staff in planning meetings, encouraged feedback across all levels, as equals, and more. She created a reverse mentorship program, where interns taught executives about digital trends, communication, and social behavior. And you know what that led to? Real initiatives, more engaged teams, and results no one expected in such a short time. What Emily did wasn't new, but it was rare. She reminded leaders that kindness is also a strategy, and that taking care of those who take care of the company is the greatest investment of all. Within weeks, spontaneous smiles started appearing in the hallways. Real conversations happened between departments, and even ideas from the break room turned into real projects. The company breathed differently, but what came next would make even the most skeptical rethink everything they knew about leadership. Less than 6 months after that quiet revolution, the numbers started screaming what only hearts had felt before. The company's profits doubled. Turnover dropped drastically. The toxic work climate became a source of pride. Renowned consulting firms started knocking on the door, eager to understand the secret method. And what they found was almost unbelievable. A former janitor who became CEO through something the corporate world often overlooks: humanization. Emily was invited to speak at business conferences, featured in management magazines, and referenced in international MBAs. But she always began her talks the same way. "I just did what any sensible person would do. I treated people like people. Simple, direct, and revolutionary." Because while the market chased imported formulas and complex theories, she delivered results with listening, consistency, and courage. And that, my friends, is rarer than it should be. The most fascinating part. Emily rejected labels like success story or inspiring example. She said she only wanted to return dignity to the hallways where she had once been ignored. And that struck deep. Because deep down, everyone has had a story silenced by an arrogant badge or a look of disdain. And seeing someone rewrite their destiny with grace is the kind of example no spreadsheet can measure. But there was still one final encounter waiting for her. He walked into the room slowly, as if carrying a weight no expensive suit could hide. He was one of the firm's most feared lawyers, known for his sharp sarcasm and contempt for subordinates. Emily recognized him immediately. After all, he was one of those who barely lifted his head when she cleaned his desk. But now, standing in front of her, he seemed smaller, and the first thing he did was take a deep breath, lower his eyes, and apologize. It was a sincere, timid, almost childlike apology. He said he was ashamed for not having seen who she really was, that now he understood the value of seeing beyond the obvious, and he thanked her for not holding a grudge, for turning humiliation into leadership. He said he learned more in 6 months with Emily than in 20 years of his career, and that moment with no applause or flashing cameras was one of the most symbolic in the entire story of that company. Emily just smiled. There was no pride or irony in her response, only lightness. Because when we forgive, we're the ones who get free. And in that moment, she understood something profound. The true impact of transformation isn't in painted walls, rising charts, or headlines. It's in the small changes that happen inside the people you least expect. And there, in that sincere apology, something important was rewritten and pointed to something even greater. Today, in every room of that company, there's a simple phrase carved on a light wooden plaque, placed right at eye level. Never underestimate those who walk in silence. Sometimes, it's the silence that changes the world. Emily didn't want a statue or a room named after her. She preferred to leave a living reminder, something that would cut through busy days and rushed meetings, something that would reach even the most arrogant, quietly, just like she always did. A reminder that someone's worth isn't in how loud they speak, but in how deeply they act. People still tell Emily's story in the hallways now with reverence. Newcomers learn on their first day that no one there is invisible, that every glance matters, that every role holds dignity, and that lesson spread. Other companies tried to copy the model, attempted to replicate the Emily style, but soon realized it wasn't a model, it was a mindset, a way of seeing others that can't be taught in slides, only by living example. And the truth is, great stories don't need a spotlight, they need courage. The courage to do what's right when no one's watching, the courage to turn silence into a revolution. And in that, Emily left more than a legacy. She sparked a shift in mentality. Because once you learn to see beyond the uniform, you'll never look at anyone the same again. But the story Emily started still echoed into something bigger. How many times have you walked past someone like Emily and didn't even notice? How often have you crossed paths with someone who seemed like just another person in the hallway, in the elevator, at the front desk, and didn't even look them in the eyes? How many incredible stories have passed you by, in silence, while your mind was too busy judging, assuming, or rushing to conclusions? The world is full of Emilys, and almost no one realizes it. Emily is the kind of professional who arrives early and leaves late, who cleans the floors dirtied by other people's egos, picks up the pieces of poor decisions, and organizes everyone else's chaos without being noticed. She's the one holding the company together behind the scenes, who hears more than she speaks, who sees everything, but remains invisible. And even so, she keeps going, day after day, because despite everything, she believes that one day, someone will notice, that one day, the effort will make sense, that one day, her story will be worth telling. But the saddest part is that most of the time, that day only comes when it's too late, when the company has already lost someone valuable, when the colleague is already gone, when the talent has already been suffocated by dismissive looks and careless words. And then comes the guilt, disguised as surprise. Wow, she was so dedicated. I never imagined she was going through that. If I had known earlier, I would have done things differently. But by then, it's no use. The story that could have been one of recognition turns into regret. And maybe you're thinking, but I've never treated anyone badly. Okay, but did you treat them attentively? Did you value them? Did you see beyond the uniform? Beyond the title? Beyond appearances? Because sometimes, disregard doesn't come through shouting. It comes through silence, through not saying good morning, through looking away, through being kind only when it's convenient, through compliments never given. And that kind of omission also hurts. It also erases. It also excludes. Now think about this. Maybe you have been the Emily in your own story. Maybe you were the one underestimated in the interview, the idea ignored in the meeting, the voice drowned out by hierarchy. Maybe you know exactly what it feels like to give your all and still not be seen, not be remembered, not be respected the way you deserve. And if you know how much that hurts, then you also know the power of being truly seen. So the real question isn't how many Emilys have you ignored, or even how many times were you ignored. The most important question is, what are you going to do with this now? Will you keep living on autopilot, repeating the same patterns, judging without knowing, comparing labels, and devaluing those who don't match your expectations? Or will you choose to do things differently? Will you start listening with intention, observing with empathy, appreciating before it's too late? Because truly, seeing someone is an act of courage. It means stepping out of your comfort zone and accepting that, often, the person with the most to teach isn't on stage, but in the background. The one with the most to offer isn't the loudest, but the one who observes more deeply. And the person who might transform your team, your company, your life, could be wearing a name tag you never even bothered to read. And look, this isn't about romanticizing pain or building a corporate fairy tale. It's about acknowledging that real stories of transformation begin with respect. They start when someone chooses to see what others ignore, when someone decides to listen before jumping to conclusions, and when someone understands that humility isn't the absence of talent, it's the foundation for all meaningful growth. So next time you cross paths with an Emily, stop, look her in the eyes, ask her name, say thank you. Listen, who knows? She might hold the key to a turning point you never saw coming. Who knows? Behind that uniform lies a potential the world desperately needs to know. And who knows? Maybe one small gesture from you could turn a nearly forgotten story into one that's truly unforgettable. And if this story made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Like it. Comment below what touched you, what you've lived through, or even what you want to change. Share it with someone who needs this reflection, because the world is full of people stuck in old habits, but also full of people ready to change. And that change starts with awareness, with action, with empathy. And of course, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, because here, we don't just tell stories, we deliver life lessons that the real world tries to hide. We give voice to those no one listens to, and we remind you, every day, that no one is too invisible to be seen, and no one is too small to be great. And trust me, you won't want to miss the next one.